The big problem with modern Darwinism is that it lacks a coherent theory of adaptation. This is a real problem. Adaptation is at the core of Darwin's concept of success in the struggle for life. Organisms succeed in life because they are well suited to life. They are, in a word, well adapted. Those that are better suited to life, better adapted, are more likely to breed and leave offspring compared to those less well adapted. Darwin himself struggled with this problem. Remember his theory of gemmules? That was the outcome of Darwin's own struggle with the concept of adaptation. The confusion over adaptation carried on through the 19th and early 20th centuries, culminating in the crisis of Darwinism. Once the crisis was supposedly resolved by the genetic theory of natural selection, the confusion over adaptation got worse, not better. So the place to start is with a critical look at adaptation itself and how we think about it. We've already introduced adaptation as a tendency to aptitude, and we illustrated tendency to aptitude with a fanciful example, how the ears of fennec foxes might grow longer in hotter conditions or grow shorter in colder conditions. In both circumstances, the tendency is to adjust structure and function, in this case the ears as heat radiators, to prevailing conditions. Now, I pulled that example more or less out of the air, so let's look at a real example. It involves fish, which naturally swim. Let's set some context. Fish swim using muscles along the body. These muscles are what we eat. But back to swimming. The fish's muscles are activated by nerves coming from the fish's nervous system. And we're going to take a look at how the fish controls those muscles. We're going to focus on a particular enzyme known as acetylcholinesterase. That's already a mouthful, so we'll just call it ACH for short. I don't want to get into a lot of detail about ACH because it's so easy to get lost in those weeds. Basically, this enzyme is located at the nerve terminal, the junction between the nerve and the muscle. ACH helps transmit a signal from the nerve to the muscle, causing it to contract. If ACH does not work, the signal is not transmitted and the fish cannot swim. Okay, that's the context. On to the adaptation. The function of all enzymes is affected by temperature. For the fish, if the water gets too cold, ACH will no longer work and the fish no longer will be able to swim. So we need to take a look at how temperature affects ACH. It's going to be a little technical, but easy to understand once I've walked you through it. We're going to look at the effective temperature on a quantity known as the Michaelis constant, K sub m. Okay, that's already too complicated, so let's simplify it. All we really need to know about the Michaelis constant is that it is a measure of good function of the enzyme. The lower this number, the better the function. And the temperature where it's minimized is the best temperature for it to be. For swimming, this means there will be a range of temperatures where it's possible for the fish to swim and a range where it's not. Okay, that's simpler. Let's now compare two fish that inhabit waters that are very different in temperature. Here's the plot for the Michaelis constant for the ice fish, which inhabits very cold Antarctic waters. And now compare that with the plot for the trout, which inhabits more moderate waters. Okay, this is interesting. Ice fish ACH at -2 degrees Celsius functions as well as trout ACH at 25 degrees Celsius. And this means that ice fish can swim around in very cold waters as well as trout can in warmer waters. But neither will be able to swim in waters the other inhabits. Suppose we take a trout happily inhabiting water at a temperature of 25 degrees and we move it to much colder water, say 2 degrees. What you'll end up with is a dead trout, and this is not surprising. At cold temperatures, the value of the Michaelis constant for trout ACH is very high and function will be very poor. That fish will not be able to swim. Okay, let's add a twist. Suppose we gradually acclimate the fish to cold temperatures through a number of very small changes of temperature, allowing the fish to get used to the slightly cooler temperatures each time. Eventually, we'll end up with a happy trout again, able to swim around at a temperature of 2 degrees Celsius. If we make the transfer this way, in other words, if we allow the fish to acclimate to gradually changing temperatures, it will do just fine. But how does it do that? The acclimated trout will survive because it has made a different ACH enzyme. And here's the Michaelis constant for the ACH of the gradually acclimated trout. It's a different enzyme. That ACH now functions just as well at 2 degrees as the other ACH did when temperature was 25 degrees. This is also adaptation, and it's adaptation that happens in the lifetime of an individual fish. The modern Darwinian conception of adaptation focuses on evolution of genes, gene selectionism in a phrase, and here's how that works in our example. ACH is coded by an ACH gene located on one of the fish's chromosomes. In the trout, this gene encodes the protein, ACH, that functions well at 25 degrees. To remind us, here's the plot of the Michaelis constant for that enzyme versus temperature. Remember that the enzyme functions best when the Michaelis constant is lowest. Ice fish also have an ACH gene evolved from the same ancestor as the trout's ACH gene. The protein encoded by the ice fish ACH gene functions well at -2 degrees. And again, as a reminder, here's the Michaelis constant plot for that. Modern Darwinism has a ready explanation for how you get from one to the other. Within a population, there may be several different alleles of the ACH gene. In cooler temperatures, one of these alleles may function better than the rest, and fish possessing these alleles will do better than fish that do not. And it will be these alleles that are selected and will appear more frequently in the next generation. Carry this on for many generations, and eventually you'll have an ACH that functions well at very cold temperatures. Okay, how about adaptation through acclimation, the case of the trout being able to acclimate to cold temperatures? There's a ready Darwinian explanation for that as well. The trout has not just one, but 2 different genes for ACH. This second gene could have started off as a simple duplication of the first gene. Nothing remarkable about that. It happens all the time in genomes. So imagine a fish that routinely experiences large fluctuations of environmental temperature during its lifetime. This is certainly common in the life history of trout. Selection on the 2 ACH genes will be independent, and each separate gene will have its own set of alleles that vary slightly in function. Over many generations, selection will favor the emergence of multiple ACH genes that can be switched on and off to confer good function over the entire range of temperatures experienced by the trout. This, then, is adaptation as the genetic theory of natural selection would explain it, gene selectionism. Gene selectionism, for its part, goes hand in hand with what we might call gene determinism. Your genes determine what you are. The ACH gene for cold water, shown in dark blue, is what makes it possible for an ice fish to live in Antarctic waters, but not in warmer waters. The ACH gene for warmer water, shown in green, is what makes it possible for the trout to live in warmer water, but not in colder water. How the ice fish got its gene is the product of random variation and selection on an ancestral ACH gene. And here's a hypothetical reconstruction of evolutionary time versus environmental temperature. The ancestral gene is shown in dark green. Variation and selection, generation after generation, produces the modern versions of the gene, one for very cold temperatures, found in ice fish, and one for more moderate temperatures found in trout. In other words, it's the genes which determine adaptation. There's a handy gene selectionist argument for the adaptable trout as well. Now, there are two genes, not one, that code for a protein that can do what ACH does. In the trout, each functions well at different temperatures. Both don't function at once, though. That's why trout have to be slowly acclimatized. Switching from one ACH to the other takes time. So there has to be a third gene which codes for the switch from one ACH to the other. The switch responds to temperature by switching between the ACH genes, one at one range of temperature and the other at a different range of temperatures. This switching is a physiological function. In a gene selectionist model, even this simple physiological switch can be reduced to gene determinism. Let's return to our hypothetical evolutionary history. We start with a single ancestral ACH gene in light green, which then duplicates. There's a third gene, the ancestral switch gene, in yellow. The switch gene then could evolve through the same evolutionary history of variation and selection. As the switch gene evolves towards its modern form, it drags along the duplicate ACH genes with it as they evolve into the two distinct genes found in the modern fish. In this way, evolution of this physiological function, in this instance the adaptability to temperature, can be reduced to gene selectionism and to the same gene determinism. Adaptability is only possible because genes allow it. A very pretty idea, but probably wrong. When it comes to evolution and adaptation, the whole doctrine of gene determinism is a logical fallacy, what we might call the gene selectionist tautology. And what's that? A tautology is a logical argument in which the conclusion is simply the premise expressed in different words, and this is also known as circular reasoning. Let's pick that apart using a famous example of a tautological statement. It is what it is. Let's prove that with logic. A common way to define something is to establish what the thing is not. So we can express it is what it is by starting with what it is not. What follows is a chain of reasoning which brings us right back to the premise. It's literally a circular argument. Gene determinism is a variation on this type of argument. You are what you are, and this sets up a similar tautology. Adaptation is determined by apt function genes, which are selected to produce adaptation. But adaptation also is the result of selection for apt function genes. This is a meaningless argument. Adaptation is both cause and effect. It's a tautology. Furthermore, there's no way to identify an apt function gene for selection except by the criterion that it is selected. Adaptation, for its part, results from selection of apt function genes, whatever they are. It's on this basic logical fallacy that most of modern Darwinism is based. What I've just outlined is a pretty crude and simple example of the gene selectionist fallacy, and one could criticize this as a straw man fallacy. I have so simplified the problem just so I can have something I can knock down easily. Modern Darwinism, critics might say, is so much more sophisticated than this, and such a critic has a point. Modern Darwinism is a very sophisticated intellectual edifice. Yet it remains the case that this edifice has been built upon a fundamental fallacy. So let's, if you will, tuck the straw man argument away for a while. We'll be returning to the fallacy again and again, and the straw man will disappear. Okay, other critics might say, what's the alternative? It's easy to tear things down, but it's not so easy to build something back to take its place. Again, the critic has a point. This is where things begin to get heterodox. The viable replacement I will be building means venturing into some philosophical terrain that many scientists will find uncomfortable. Why? Because it will mean venturing into vitalist thinking, that V word, remember? We need to go there, though. Any coherent theory of evolution has to be thoroughly grounded in the unique phenomenon of life. Modern gene selectionism is incoherent because it's fundamentally alienated from the phenomenon of life. Staying with our cold adapting fish, in the gene determinist mindset, fish can only venture into cold waters if they are equipped with the genes that enable them to do so. They are slaves to their genes. And it's the genes which drive the evolution of, say, adaptation to cold waters. In this case, genes will be the leading indicator of evolution. But what if the fish have minds of their own? What if the fish wants to move into cold waters, intends to move into cold waters? Mind and intention are two of those uncomfortable vitalist ideas, and incorporating them into our evolutionary thinking complicates things enormously. But we have to venture there anyway because we are talking about evolving life. We cannot have evolution without life and its unique attributes. From this perspective, our conceptions of what is driving evolution are completely upended. Perhaps, for example, it's mind and intention, not selection of genes, that are driving the fish's move into cold waters. Perhaps the genes are just being dragged along in the wake. Genes are now the slaves of intention and mind, and genes now become the lagging indicators of evolutionary change. That's the argument upon which I will be building a heterodox model of evolution, a vitalist model of evolution.